Hi everyone, and welcome to my PoE leveling guide. This is something I want to get out because the new league is starting this Friday, and there might be some new players, or maybe you're returning, or have tried it very long ago and forgotten most of it. So this guide is for you. This is nothing really groundbreaking, nothing super fancy information for speedruns or anything, just to help you out to get the basics down, and that can already speed up your progress quite a lot. The campaign is rather long, and for your first playthrough you have to expect something like 15 hours plus probably, because you have to learn the game, you have to read a lot through the skills, the passage tree, and maybe you're not really aware of how the map layouts work and so on. And I hope that this can help you a bit. So the first playthrough will typically take quite a while, and afterwards you can probably get the number down to like 10 hours and eventually something like 8 hours. And the good players typically reach maps like fully prepared at like 5-6 hours or so. So this is kind of like the minimum. There are obviously some really crazy racers that can do a bit faster, but yeah, this is not really the norm. I've already released a video about the game mechanics, how the skill system works, how gems work, how the passage tree works, and so on. So the general stuff. So go check that out if you haven't touched the game at all yet, and then you should probably watch this after. But this is more focused on actual going through the campaign. So when you first start out, make sure you select the league that you want to play, which typically will be the temporary league, kind of like a season in Diablo. So in this case, it's going to be Harvest League, because this is going to be the upcoming one. And on Friday when it goes live, you have to click on this one, make your character, and then you can blast together with everyone else. And it doesn't really matter which class you choose. Typically, I would say that for a first character, you should not really care about efficiency at all. You should not really care about what exactly you play and so on. Just make sure that you have some fun, try to get through the campaign and learn everything. And there's like thousands of builds you can do in this game. So this is not really the issue. You can change it later on anyway. And typically, you also, even if you're following a build guide, you don't always start with exactly this build. So you have to kind of progress your way towards the build, and then at some point you swap, maybe partly or entirely. And it's very rare that you actually play the build from start to the end, because you might have to unlock the skill first in a campaign, for example. You don't have access to everything at once, and you just slowly unlock more and more skills and so on. So it's quite common to just take one of the typical common skills for each class. So that depends a little bit on what you're playing. For example, if you're playing a Marauder, you'll get a lot of melee skills at the start. If you're playing a Ranger, you get a lot of bow skills. If you're playing a Witch, you get a lot of spells, and so on. And then you just try to make do with whatever you get there. And then later on, you can unlock all the other skill gems and transition into what you want to play. For the items, you have to know that pretty much everything you find in a campaign is absolutely worthless. So you don't really have to worry about throwing away items or destroying them or whatever. Typically, you want to pick up especially the yellow items, especially for slots where you feel you need an upgrade. So at the start, it can be kind of hard to understand which items are good. Typically, you want to stack a lot of life, and then you want to stack resists. So you want to get to 75 resist for fire, cold, and lightning, because each point of resist means 1% damage reduction, and the game is balanced around that value, especially after Act 5, which is when the second part of the campaign begins. And this is typically where stuff starts hurting a lot more. For the start, obviously, you can't just go from 0 to 75 res immediately. So kind of like build your way up, and then try to keep your resist as high as possible most of the time, while still stacking some life, and then stacking whatever else you can grab, in case you're playing a spell build. Maybe it's something like Fireball, let's say. You stack the spell damage, you stack fire damage, maybe you stack a little bit of crit. And for example, for a bow build, you stack like projectile damage, you stack like physical damage to attacks, or lightning damage to attacks, and elemental damage to attacks, and so on. It can be a little bit optimized depending on what you find. But yeah, typically just wear like whatever decent yellow items you find. But this is not all, because you also have to make sure that you have the right links for your skills. So for example, when you use a split arrow, which is what I'm using, it's a green gem because it's like a bow skill. So they're typically green, and dexterity heavy. And this means that I need to find an item that has a green socket, and I need to put this skill inside this item with a green socket. And then you also want to have multiple links. So typically, like even early on, you want to go for the 3 link, and then later on you'll find 4 links, and then, you know, towards the end of the campaign you can also get lucky with a 5 link. But typically you stay on the 4 link for a while until you like in maps, and then, you know, slowly get the 5th and the 6th link. So 6 is the maximum, and typically it's going to be in your body armor. But otherwise, especially for the campaign, you can just go with, like, you know, any gloves or any boots or helm or so. Put your link there. Make sure you have the right colors for the support gems. So for example, for a bow build, there's also lots of green support gems, or for spell builds are typically blue because they're like intelligence heavy. And then the typical spell support gems are also blue. So, you know, it kind of goes by that. But there's also some builds that have like a colorful mix, so with all 3 colors, and then you always have to find the right item. And it can be quite useful to just, you know, keep a pair of gloves, for example, that has exactly the right colors with 4 links, for example, and just, you know, wear those until whenever you find another pair. And then you can freely replace everything else in your gear, essentially, because you don't really have to worry too much about it. And as long as you have your main skill set up, you have a few supporting skills, but usually they don't really require a lot of links. So you can just, you know, throw them into like a random socket in your helm that is like maybe just 1 socket, and then you have your boots that has 2 sockets, so you just throw in another thing there, like a movement skill or an aura, and you can like easily get that back when you replace the item with another one. So when you're starting out, you want to look at the items that drop on the ground, and it looks like this. For example, here we have, I just press Alt right now so I can see all the items, and you see these little colored dots here next to the item name. So there's like a little bit small text right now because it's part of my loot filter, but you see, for example, here you have like the green and the blue. They are together, and then there's like this other green that is separate, and this shows you already when the item is on the ground what links it has. So you want to keep an eye out for, you know, those slots where you want to put your skill, and you can see on the tooltip here it has exactly those 2 sockets linked, and there's 1 separate one, the green, the blue, and then the other green. And here, for example, there's a 2-link green, and here's another 2-link with blue, red, and then 1 separate blue, and so on. So this way you can already see it quite easily on the ground, and this will help you out if you keep an eye out for this. And it's also quite common to just, you know, keep a white item that has the stats that you want, or maybe a blue, and you can just throw some orb on it to make it a rare. For example, an orb of alchemy. Don't be afraid to use a currency while in the campaign. You don't really need to save it up because you're gonna get a lot more once in the end game. So you can just, you know, throw an alchemy orb, or maybe a chaos orb even here or there. If you find any essences, just throw them on an item that has a potential to roll well. Like maybe you need new weapons, or, you know, just try to pick up like a bow and throw one on and see what happens. And then you can kind of decide, you know, what item to take. Another important tip is you should pick up blue items, especially at the start, and just render them, because you will get these orb of transmutations, and they are useful to get scrolls of wisdom. Scrolls of wisdom are required to identify items, so you have to do it yourself. There's no NPC in town or anything where you can talk to, and if you don't identify them, you don't really get the value from the vendors. So if you find any blues, especially at the start, just pick them up and render them, because you will get this, and then you can render the orb of transmutations again. That's like one of those render recipes, and this will give you a lot of scrolls typically. Also make sure you pick up enough portal scrolls, because you have to go back to town quite a lot. And there are also some situations where you have to go back to town and never coming back to where you ran from. For example, there's like, you know, some secondary quests where you go into a cave or something, you kill the guy and you're done with the quest, and there's no reason to ever go back there. You can just like hit escape and go back to a login screen, and you're back in town in like, you know, 5 seconds if you have a fast computer, and you can save the portal scroll like this. Especially early on, this can be quite useful because you have to really look out for those portal scrolls. A few more notes about items that you want to look for in the campaign also are the flasks. So typically you find these life flasks, so you always want to have probably like 1 life flask at least, maybe a mana flask if you have like a really mana heavy build on your flask bar. And otherwise you try to get at least 1 Quicksilver. You get 1 quite early in the campaign actually from a quest, which is in Act 1 in the Tidal Island. So there you can choose to select a Quicksilver Flask, and yeah, this is quite nice because it gives you movement speed. Also, for example, for boots, Typically, the most important stat is movement speed because it's a very rare stat to get on items. And yeah, this just helps you to speed up the entire game. It helps you with dodging enemy attacks. And it's gonna make everything feel more smooth when you have like this, 20% move speed or so. Also, one thing is you can change items, you can craft on them. So when you have an yellow item and it doesn't have 6 stats, you can check when you hover over it and you press Alt. So it looks like this, for example, and it will show you prefix, 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 and then suffix, 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 and so on. So you can have 3 prefixes, 3 suffixes. I'm not going to go into details of this now, but yeah, there is the movement speed craft, for example, and there's also other crafts that you can do in your hideout. So in your hideout, there's a crafting bench. So you go there by clicking on a waypoint, clicking to your hideout. You might not have this at the start, but there's at some point in the campaign you will get it, and then you can select different hideouts. You can also decorate them and so on. But there will be a crafting bench, and if it's not there, then you can press on Edit and decorations, and then I think it should be here somewhere. So this will be there's like a bunch of objects, and you can put it somewhere wherever you want, and then you can use it. And you see you can select either whatever you have here, boots or belt or whatever. You can also just put in the item, for example like this, and it will show you which results you can do. And like this you can kind of optimize items a little bit. So when you find something that is like decent to use for a while, then don't hesitate to spend your currency that you found just crafting one roll of movement speed on the boots, and then maybe some life on the ring, and maybe a resist that you're lacking on a helm or something like that. That can help you out quite a lot as well. So with the general stuff out of the way, let's go over the campaign a little bit. And there's a map to every part of the campaign. So there's 10 acts, as I said, 2 parts here. And then there's the epilogue, which is after you've beaten the campaign. You have like this town here, Oriath, and then you have your hideout as well, that you can go to. But typically you start out here in Act 1. And this is the Twilight Strand, and then you always have these icons here for each zone. So this is the one zone, and then you have the town here, and then this is the next zone, and so on. When you have an empty circle, this means that there's no waypoint. With a point, with like this circle filled, this means there is a waypoint. And when you see a small dot inside the circle, it means there is a waypoint, but you haven't found it yet. So typically you want to make sure you collect all the waypoints. Especially when you're new, there will be some waypoints you have to go back to, and you rather make sure that you get it while you're going through the zone, in case you actually have to backtrack. It's not very fun, so make sure you find the waypoints in most cases when you can. The good part here is that you will always have the active quest highlighted, so this orange stuff here will show you where to go, and this is typically showing you the main quest, so you can see it here on the side. There's also this little exclamation mark, and that will select the quest for you on the map. And like this, you can always see where you have to go. And for me, this is just the optional quest here right now, because this is after the campaign already. And the main quest has a different color, and you can click for that. But it might not always be displayed. So if there's no main quest at all, that it typically means you are at a step where you have to talk to someone in town. So if you're a little bit lost about what to do next, just try to go to town and talk to everyone, and typically you will find the next quest, and then it will also show on the map again. Because in PoE, you can actually pretty much complete the quests without having them, and then they will start appearing in your quest log once you've done like a critical step or so. So about the optional quests, there are actually quite a lot that you want to do, because they give you additional skill points. There are 24 additional skill points, and you get all of them through the campaign, and most of them through those optional quests. Some of them can be acquired through the main quests, but most of them actually come from those optional quests. And you can see this on this overview here, and I'm also going to put the link in the description. So this is a neat little cheat sheet to just give you an overview, and you can see the name of the quest, and you see how many skill points you get. And it totals to 24. So 2 of them come from a main quest where you have the choice between different rewards, which is in Act 2, Deal with the Bandits. And basically it has the choice to either keep one alive or kill all of the bandits, and you get different rewards depending on who you help. Typically I would suggest to just go with either the 2 skill points, which means killing all the bandits, or you help Alira, which is one that gives you 15 auras and a bunch of crit damage and a little bit of mana modifier. So this is also what I go with very often, because I typically make crit builds and then this is useful. So this is up to you. And yeah, the other 2 bandits are not really great. So this is the only permanent choice, or semi-permanent, you can still change it later on, but the only choice in the campaign, so to say. So this is part of the main quest, and this is where you have to decide. But otherwise, most of these are just like, go somewhere, kill an enemy or collect something, and then turn it in, and you get the skill book. You just press it and you have the extra skill point, that's it. So just make sure you go through this list when you're going through the campaign, and in every act you see, okay, this has 3 quests here, 2 quests there, and so on. Look out for those quests and make sure you do them while you're going through. Then the next important thing are the lab trials, and they are a special part of the game where you get your ascendancy, which is essentially a subclass for each of the classes. So every one of them has 3 ascendancies, and they are a really strong power boost. So you have to go for this, and you go for one of them typically after Act 3, after Act 7, and after Act 10. And then there's also the Uber Lab, which has trials that you find in maps, and then you have to do 6 more trials, and then eventually you can access the Uber Lab, which usually is actually the easiest one, because at this point, when you have found all the trials, your character will usually be, way out leveling and out gearing the actual content. But the special thing about the lab is you have access to it in Act 3 in a town. There's a little portal, and with this you can go into the Labyrinth. And it is a zone with lots of traps that you have to dodge, or there's like, some saw blades coming out of the ground, or some poison darts shooting at you from the wall. And there's also like some enemies and so on. And there's this boss called Izaro, which is a really cool guy, and one of my favorite antagonists, I guess. But yeah, he has amazing lore, so make sure you click those lore buttons, and yeah, just make sure you go through this lab, and you have to do it in one try. You cannot die in the entirety of the run, so this is a little special. Typically, especially in the campaign, you have infinite tries, and in maps you also have 6 tries for every map. So this is rather easy to complete a map. But in lab, you have only 1 try every time. So if you die, you have to start over from the start. You don't lose anything, but it can be quite annoying when you're like, 15 minutes into a run or so, and then you have to start over because you have messed up. So be very careful, especially when you're not really aware of how strong those traps are. They can hurt, and also the boss can hurt. So, try to walk circles, see his attacks, and make sure you dodge them properly. Just, I want to notice. And for some general tips at the end, you want to make sure that you just run most of the time and kill only the big packs. Don't waste your time with fighting single elites. Especially yellows have quite a lot of HP, and they're typically not worth the time, especially when your build is weak, which most likely it's going to be because you don't have items, you have probably a crappy setup and so on. So it's not very hard to clear trash. And also blue packs. Blue packs are actually the stuff you want to kill the most, because they also don't really have much more HP than typical trash, but they give a lot more XP. So typically you can just blast down blue packs and run through the zone, and this is about it. And when you feel, you're a little bit underleveled, then, just kill a bit more stuff on the way, and that's about it. So don't waste your time exploring every zone completely, don't waste your time killing every single mob. Just get the most juicy pulls, and this is about it. And as for the actual pathing through the zones, you can see this here on the map. It's typically quite straightforward. So, you start here and then you go up here, and there's like a side quest, for example, Tidal Island, which you want to do. And then you have the Flooded Depths, which is a skill point. So you want to do this as well. But, typically it just goes like a straight path through the entire act. And there's not really much that you can do wrong in most cases. So, yeah, sometimes you have a little bit more side zones. For example, here in Act 2, you start kind of like in the middle, and you go to 2 different sides, and then there's like, for example, one of these bandits here in the broken bridge, and then you have to take this waypoint here and go back, and here's like one of the trials, and then you go back to town and you go this way, and so on. So it's typically, with the way that the quest is displayed on the map, it will be highlighted where you need to go. And it's not really such a big deal to actually find your way through the campaign using this map and using this highlighting feature. And sometimes you have like these points here where you have to spread out or like go to different sides. So it doesn't really matter which side you go first usually, and then you just come back and do the other one. So this happens a few times during the campaign. For example, again here we have Solaris Temple, and then we have the Lunaris Temple. So it has like 2 different sides here, and so on. Yeah, and then this way it goes through the entire campaign. I can just show you all the maps quickly if you like. So this is what it looks like. For example, Act 5 and Act 10, they're kind of like more like a centralized hub zone where you have like it spreads out to like 4 or 5 different side zones. The same happens here, for example. And otherwise, you have like these typical go through with like one single path. And this is what it looks like. There's obviously a lot of tips that I could give through the campaign itself, but this video is already quite long, so I'm rather going to skip this. And just in general, I think I explained most of the things you need to know to just find your way through. And yeah, make sure that especially on the bosses, you try to dodge more than to attack, especially when you don't know the fights. Most stuff really hurts, and yeah, some of the campaign bosses are also quite tanky, but it's not really such a big deal. We fight like 2 big bosses per act or so, and it doesn't matter if the fight takes a few minutes, I guess. So just make sure you dodge. This is the most important part. It's just in general, surviving in PoE really comes down to your ability to predict enemy attacks and to dodge enemy attacks. And I'm not talking about the % dodge chance that a character might have. I'm talking about actually pressing buttons. So try to get to know the fights a little bit, and this will make it much easier. And don't really focus too much on attacking, because you're just gonna die very easily. And yeah. So again, to this overview, I talked about the trials, and this is also included here in this overview. And you make sure you also do those trials. You make sure you do the side quests with the skill points, and make sure you do the trials, because you will need both to actually build an endgame character. And you don't really want to go back through a low little zone and get this 1 point or something. So when it's actually like current content for you, you still get some XP from killing stuff on the way there. So it does help you out a bit. One thing to note though is this is like a little outdated. So this one quest in Act 10, Map to Suada, is actually replaced, and you have to kill Vilenta, because it's called Vilenta's Vengeance. So I just wanted to mention this here. This is just, I didn't make this one, it's just a link I have, and this is the only thing that is different from the actual game. So I hope that this guide helps you to go through the campaign a little bit faster than you otherwise would. I know it can be quite overwhelming. It's a really new game with lots of content, so this might help you a bit here. And otherwise, yeah, hope you like this video, and see you guys next time.